right, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm your host, Courtenay, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hello, welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I am here today with my friend David Hendry. He is a fellow podcaster. He's the host of the Crazy Canuck Truckin' podcast. He is also a freelance writer, a family man. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. It's nice to see you, Courtenay, and thank you for having me on.
Likewise, and thank you for being here. So before we get started, I do want to say that Dave is one of those people that makes me appreciate social media. I think a lot of us have this kind of love-hate relationship with social media, but there's some really genuine connections that have been, fostered and discovered, at least for me personally. And you are one of those people for me that is, I feel a true friend, even though we've only met, virtually and through video. I hope to change that one day, but, who's also a constant source of support and inspiration. So I'm very grateful for that, to you and to social media for connecting us. So tell us a little bit, for those who may not know, a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got to doing what you're doing now.
Well, I'll try to give you the short version here. I was a sports jock growing up, loved playing hard, hitting hard. I always said that getting hit on my head was the least damageable part of my body, and man, I have come to regret that kind of attitude. And I thought that people with mental health issues were just weak and were not, they just needed to suck it up, and then I'd been knocked out, playing rugby, and I was in a real bad farm accident in 1991 where I got my cheek is titanium and my eye socket is plastic, and was given no chance of survival. Well, they said that if I did survive the night, then I'd be a vegetable for the rest of my life. And so in my speaking events, I always like to say, well, yeah, they were kind of right, because I do look like Mr. Potato Head, with very little hair on top and a chubby body, and so they were kind of right. But anyway, during one of the, I had a crash 10 years after that, truck stop in Tallahassee, Florida, and I had my first panic attack. And then I realized there's something wrong, because I prided myself on my mental strength, what I thought was mental strength, and prided myself on being able to get through anything. I'm not a big guy, but I acted like a big guy and always pushed through. People used to call me Big Dave. Even though I'm only 5'10", and I had the attitude, and when I couldn't get out of that panic attack, I realized there's something wrong. And then life went on, and I got some help. And in 2016, I was the wonderful recipient of another head injury. And by then I was tired. I was ready to give up on life. And a therapist came along to me and put her finger on my chest and said, David, you have a story. You need to get it out. And so I really believe that the reason I'm alive today is to try and help people who were like me and who thought that all these issues are just in your head, which they are in your head, and that's okay, and so that's...
Just because they're in your head doesn't mean that they can't be conquered or dealt with or handled and managed. Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw you on Instagram a few years ago, and people ask me sometimes, how do you meet these people? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know, because I can scroll through tons and tons of people, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's one like you, Kinetic Quartz. I'm like, there's something about this person, and so I started watching your stuff, and I was just like, wow, I thought you were a great athlete, and you are a great athlete, but when you look at your whole story, you're far beyond that. And so I love running into that's the thing I love about social media too. I see there's a lot of bad, but I choose to see the good. I choose
Mhm.
to see the ones like you and others that inspire me
Thank
to
you.
keep going. So that's kind of a fairly short version of my background.
Yeah,
Taking
I'm
a lot of
honored.
hits to the head, and I'm back. And
Yeah.
I saw my physiotherapist today, and I was telling her about you and whatnot, and I said she's like superhuman, and we were saying something, and I said, well, I'm still alive, I'm on borrowed time, so I'm thankful for every minute that I have. And she's like, well, that's your superpower.
Yeah,
Just
I
like me.
agree with
So
her. Yeah.
yeah, so
For sure. Well, I'm really honored to, connect and be a part of your journey and, any inspiration that I could offer because I feel like your story is incredibly inspiring. And your attitude is really, really it's powerful and empowering, I think, to others. So you're a truck driver. How did you get into truck driving?
because I couldn't afford to farm. you know,
Wow.
I grew up as a country boy, Canadian country boy, and I
Yep.
wanted to. I loved anything that made noise, like any motor, any tractor, So
Right.
and I always wanted to cut hay, to bale hay, to do all these things, and I didn't grow up on a farm that my family had. Worked on them all through high school,
Oh
and
wow.
my my big thing was anything that has a steering wheel and a motor, I wanted to be involved.
Oh,
And back then, a farm worker was paid a pittance,
right.
paid nothing, and I was like, well, I I can maybe fulfill some of that by being a truck driver, and so I it was hard. It was really hard to get into truck driving in those days. You needed 5 years experience. You needed to be 25 years old, and because I'm the aggressive kind of person, I wanted to be doing everything by the time I was 18, right?
Sure. I get that.
so, so I was working at a feed mill, and I convinced them to let me drive their truck and do my learners through that, and then I moved down to the States and uh, started working for this company hauling eggs with a straight truck. That was
Mhm.
my my second real job. But then they said, "Hey, you want to drive? You interested in driving a semi?" They asked me that right in my first interview. I'm like, "Oh yeah." so my first semi truck driving job was hauling eggs up and down the East Coast in the U.S. And after
Wow.
that, everything else has been easy compared to that.
Well,
so
what a
hauling
gift.
eggs, hauling eggs is not. I mean, try carrying 2 dozen in your hands and then multiply that by many thousands in a truck.
Sure. Sure.
So
But what a gift to have your first job be the toughest because
yeah,
it teaches you so much and prepares you. Yeah.
yeah. But
Wow.
so that's how I got into it, and I've been a company owner, and I've been just a company driver, and I've been an owner operator. I've been just about everything in trucking. But
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah, so
So in our industrialized society, you were saying that the farmers weren't paid very much, which is really unfortunate. I know America's founding really was farmers. Most
yep,
of our founding fathers were, agrarian, yeah, in nature.
yeah.
And so, and when I've read some of the stories of, people like George Washington, they talk about how much they learned from farming. And I have some friends who are farmers, and the wisdom that they impart to me from their journey as a farmer is just astounding to me. I'm so grateful to, learn from them and what they witness, witnessing that ecosystem. I'm curious, what are some big takeaways you learned as a kid farming?
Well, the first and really easy one is working hard,
Yeah.
you know, and problem solving,
Yeah.
you know, because if you're on a farm and you're like, especially for us back in those days, you know, this is the mid 80s,
Yeah.
you know, then if a tire blew on a hay wagon, we
Mhm.
don't call a tire guy. You go back to the shop and you find a tire and you bring it out, you jack up the hay wagon, or if you have something else that breaks,
Right.
you don't call back then you didn't call a mechanic. You know,
Right.
you figured out what was wrong. And you know, and as far as when we're putting hay into a hay mow,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're using your math, you're thinking, okay, I need to fit this many bales in this area. How can I make it fit the best? You know, so you're using geometry and everything else to, I mean, farming to me is something that has taught me virtually everything. And I worked for a very hardworking guy. He was in his 60s already when I worked for him. And man, I don't think I would have wanted to work for him when he was in his 20s because he was a hard worker in his 60s. And he was killing me when I was a teenager. You know, but
Right.
and the value of a dollar, you
Yeah.
know. And I heard once that when society forgets that they come from the farm,
Mm-hmm.
then the society breaks down. When they think that um, their industrial stuff is more important than the farms, then they start losing it,
Yeah.
and
I
and
think
the
we're seeing
society
that
goes down.
today.
Yeah,
I think we're really witnessing that today.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's sad to see. And I mean, I still have my fingers in the dirt. You know,
Yeah.
I do a little bit of sweet corn stuff, and
Awesome.
you know, still do a little bit of things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So you said that you had spent some time working in the US and you
Yeah.
live in Canada now. I'm curious what you see, we're kind of, we're neighbors and we're in a lot of ways very similar countries, but I'm curious your experience as the similarities and the differences.
Um, the the similarity is that we are all people, and all of us in North America, we have either roots that are very, very deep here
Mhm.
through our, you know, through the original
Mhm.
people that lived here, or we came here to get away from tyranny and get away to have freedom. So in that way, Canada and the U.S. were very similar. Um, we right now both have some interesting challenges in our governments, you know.
Yeah, to say the
But
least, yeah.
it was I grew up near Toronto, and so I was still kind of country,
Mhm.
but I knew what it was like to be in Toronto. I knew what it was like to be in the rat race.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to the eastern coast of the US, I was living in Delaware and running up and down through New York and stuff. It was the busyness there didn't scare me as much as, you know, if I had come from where I live now out in the prairies,
Right.
you know. And it but it still was a challenge. There's always traffic, and I was just like, oh, get me out of here. I didn't want to be in traffic all the time, you know.
Understandable.
And you know what? I've been all over. I've hit every place in the continental U.S. and Canada pretty much. And there's areas that I like being in. There's areas that aren't quite as nice,
Mhm. Sure.
and there's areas that are people are very friendly.
Mhm.
And New York is not one of those. But
That's interesting.
interesting.
I mean, I grew up right outside New York City, and I actually feel, and I
Yeah.
lived in Manhattan for years, and I actually feel the opposite. I feel they're very direct, but I actually, having lived in LA, we're outside of LA in Santa Monica for so many years now, I feel like New Yorkers are so much more friendly. They're a little abrasive because they're direct. And I
Yes.
actually, I always say that it has a lot to do with proximity. I think that this is just my theory, but like, I think that in New York, because, it's 13 miles long and it's like 6 miles wide. It's like, it's a small space, New York City, I'm talking about. I went to school upstate New York. That's very different. But New York City, I think a lot of it has to do with, you're not going to be fake to people, because the chances of you seeing them and dealing with them again, the likelihood is actually pretty high. The odds are, not in your favor that you can just run away from them. Whereas in, LA, it's so spread out. So I feel like people can, be nice to your face and like pretend, and then hope that they just never have to see you again and just walk off. So I feel like the interaction, it may make it more pleasant in the meantime, but I appreciate that like directness of New Yorkers, but I get that it's not everyone's cup of tea.
It's interesting, the thing I didn't like, and when I think back on it, I didn't like all the traffic all the time.
Sure.
So that kind of clouds,
Right.
where we got flies around here like crazy this year. It kind of clouds my judgment, with the traffic. But some hilarious people there, I had some really fun times, and my oldest boy, he actually lives back there still, or
Yeah.
he's gone back to live there. And he's starting to drive a truck now, and he's had the same experience where he's driving a straight truck, and he's selling refrigerated products, and he is their New York runner now,
Ah.
and he's loving running New York, and he says, "Dad, I can get out all my aggression and not look silly."
Oh, that's funny.
He's funny, and he's yell at each other in traffic, and then you get going, and it's like he's having a blast, and he's running New York and not Long Island all week long, and other drivers just hate it there, and he's loving it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's awesome.
So he
Well,
calls me up and tells me about stuff he's seeing in New York today, and it's like, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
that, that's so great that you get to share that, with
Yeah.
him. Yeah. I actually have spent a lot of time in Canada, because growing up, my dad had us spend like all of our family vacations there. He loved Canada. He always used to say that he wished he were born Canadian. And when I would ask him why, he would say he loved the people and the weather. My dad loved the cold. I do not share that, but he loved the cold weather. But it was always, I really think what I really think it is yes, I do think the people are really nice, but I think it's also because my dad took 1 year of French in, and granted, I know, it's really just Montreal, but 1 year of French in college, and they were polite enough to let him, practice his French on them. So I think he really appreciated that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I used to go skiing there, and we used to go to Edmonton like once a year and go to the West Edmonton Mall, and we would stay in. You familiar with the West Edmonton Mall?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we would
The
stay.
first big super mall, right?
Yeah, before the Mall of America, which
Yeah.
is larger, but the West Edmonton Mall was the first mall of that magnitude. And I went bungee jumping there. That was my first time bungee jumping, and like indoors because it was that big,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we would stay in the hotel that had like different themes, and we would do the different theme, like the different line each year. So it was a really fun experience, and it is really beautiful. A lot of
Yeah.
Canada is really beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the injuries that you incurred and how they impacted you.
You want to go over just the head injuries or everything?
Well,
But the
since
podcast might be
it
not.
might, we might need more time to go through each
Yeah.
injury. Let's focus on the head injury, because that seems to be a lot of what you focus on in your speaking and in your writing, and what you share with how to deal with those. So
I was never careful as a kid with getting my head hit, and you get busy, or you get your bell rung a little bit. It's not it was not a big deal to me. It was like, that's okay. And you go on.
right.
And then I got knocked out in rugby during practice. And I love, I was not a big guy, but I played in the scrum because that's just how I was.
Right.
And it was actually just during practice, I tackled a guy wrong, and I caught a knee to the side of my head. And I woke up and here's the circle, you know, the typical thing. People are all around you as you're looking up from the ground, right? Like, what
Oh,
happened? The coach, you know, and I tried to ask the coach about it later.
yeah.
For some reason, it really bothered me. I said, you know, like, what happened? He said, you just got your bell rung. Don't worry about it. But that wasn't enough for me, really. And I was like, well, what happened? And he wouldn't tell me. And I ended up figuring out what happened. But plus, I'm a bit of a with certain things. I'm a perfectionist. Not a lot of things, but the few things, you know, I didn't want to get knocked out again. So I wanted to figure out what I had done wrong.
Sure. And
And
learn from it. Yeah.
you know, and the because the coach, you know, I believed I'm from a generation where we listen to our elders, listen to the ones that are above us,
Yeah.
somewhat, and even though if we complain about it, you know, at the time, but the coach said, no big deal. So then I was like, okay, I guess it's no big deal, you know, and so that was the attitude I had. And then when I was 23 years old, I was working on a farm. I was a farm manager,
Mhm.
um, as well as doing some what we call hot shot work, which is um, pickup trucks and trailers. You know, instead of the big rigs, you know,
Uh-huh.
I was still getting my trucking fixed by doing that and farming, and I was helping out a guy that was connected to my farm, and ended up destroying the right side of my face, and um, that's where they said, you know, there'd be no hope. And I wasn't off work for that terribly long, but I went back to work way too soon because, you know, Big Dave, I can handle it, you know, and they were concerned about my eye. So
Yeah.
I have some issues with the eye, but it's plastic eye socket.
Wow.
Um, and the doctor's like, how did you completely shatter your eye socket and your eye still works? So the vision still works. It's a little quirky with certain things, but
Yeah.
um, and the muscles, of course, are somewhat damaged from the bone fragments.
Right.
Um, so there was concern with that, with dust and being on the farm. So I got away from the hog farm
Right.
and went to work for a guy doing fertilizer and driving big equipment there and driving trucks there. Um, and I had zero understanding of head injuries. And the doctors were concerned about the eye. They were concerned about my back because I had herniated a disc in my back at the same time,
Wow.
and they were concerned about that, but they weren't concerned about the head injury. And
Interesting.
then, you know, when you lose your balance and you lose some of your uh, judgmental type of things with a brain injury,
Yeah.
then you end up doing things that aren't always the smartest because part of the brain is saying, I can do that. And
Hmm.
the body's like, oh, no, you can't.
Oh.
And so I had, you know, I broke my elbow because I lost my balance one time on a sheet of ice. And just a pro tip, if you're carrying a 1 gallon water bottle in your hand
Hmm.
and you fall on the ice, let go of the water bottle because when you don't,
Oh no.
it'll break something. And in this case, it was my
Right.
elbow.
Ouch.
And uh, so then that I went to work as a fleet manager at a large trucking company
Mhm.
because I couldn't drive my truck anymore. Couldn't, and you know, and this was it was I had some good success as a fleet manager,
Mhm.
and then I was reacting in ways that weren't great, and because I still wasn't understanding the head injury, so I ended up getting back into a truck. And when I was at a truck stop in Tallahassee, Florida, March 8th, 2001,
Okay.
then I had just witnessed earlier in that day. I had just witnessed a hit and run accident in a parking lot, and that was by Daytona Beach. and I was over by Tallahassee then for the night. I parked in the back corner because I'm like, I'm not letting anybody near. And a guy that had only been driving for 1 week found me anyway. Did
Wow.
$35,000 damage to a $40,000 truck,
Whoa.
and threw me from the bunk, like the bed in the back of the truck, all the way up to the front.
Wow.
And of course, being me, I clobbered everything on the way through with my head, like the old cartoons, right? Just boom, 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 boom,
Wow.
So hurt the neck, which obviously is the conduit into the brain, and you need to have that working well to have
The
brain
brain
function.
stem starts right at the top of the neck. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had injuries on the top of my head, and so I didn't have any broken bones at that time.
That's good.
And I thought that I was still going to be fine, because I was like, it's no big deal,
Right.
And my truck wasn't drivable, so I was going to fly home. But yet I couldn't focus on anything. I was having a hard time, and then I had a panic attack on the way to the airport, and I was like, Big Dave, you have a problem. Houston, you have a problem.
Right.
And I started seeing a psychiatrist and seeing psychologists, and I started getting lots of help. Mm-hmm. And so the journey is never quick. I mean, we can't undo a couple decades of being an idiot in a short time. It takes time to retrain ourselves. And in the meantime, I had blown out a knee, and I had I broke my left elbow then, and it seemed like for many, many years all I've been doing is rehabbing something, and a lot of it relates back to lack of something because of brain. Right. Whether it's lack of balance or lack of smarts, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. And because we lose, I mean, we're like, in a sense, we're like alcoholics, where we suddenly think that we're much better than we actually are.
Right.
Lose our inhibitions with some brain injuries, right? And then in 2016, I was up on top of a load. I was tying some stuff down and climbing down, and I lost my grip. And that's one thing I've almost always been able to do, is to hang on to something with my hands.
Right.
Strong arms, strong shoulders. And I fell off, and of course I fell backwards. And where am I going to hit? I'm going to hit head first. And so that was the back of the head.
Ouch.
And that's the second time I should have not made it. And I managed to make it. I was on a paved road. I mean, why would you fall onto dirt, which would be much softer? And so I went in, and that was a bad summer. That was a bad summer, and I was very suicidal at the time. Wow. And it was 2016, and I was just tired, Courtney. Yeah. I was tired. I was tired of rehabbing. I was tired of dealing with these head injuries. My family has had to deal with me with stuff like this, and it, for the 90s, when I didn't understand what I was going through, right? I'd kind of put my kids through hell, and that really bothered me. And I'm like, well, maybe they'd be better off without me. And I realized that my family would still rather have me with my faults, of course, than not have me at all. Absolutely. And that's when that therapist, Sylvia, came up to me and put her finger on my chest and said, "You have a story you need to get out," because she knew a little bit about my background. And then after I went through a work a return to work program. And this is really interesting. If you're gonna get injured on the job, do not do it for a company that has less than 10 employees.
Oh, okay. Why?
If you're in Manitoba, or
Okay.
I don't know if it's like that everywhere, but
All right.
because the company was so small,
Yeah.
it really limits my it really limits what you can get for help.
Right. Sure.
So they were working with me, and workers' compensation was doing really, really good job,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean that sincerely. The My adjuster Blair, she was amazing. She tried to do as much as she could for me, and
Sure.
after several months, she's like, "Look, there's this return to work program, and it's mind, body, soul,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and
Sounds great.
everything's wrapped together,
Right.
and we want to put you in it if you agree. It will be 8 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and if you make it through the program successfully, you'll be rehabbed and ready to go to work."
Mm.
And I'm like, okay. And then you're cut off with us, with WCB, workers' comp. You're cut off. I'm like, kind of understandable.
Okay.
If you go through this program for 8 weeks and you don't make it through, you are still cut off.
Okay.
So your options are you either succeed or you don't succeed. Either way, we're done with you.
Okay. Well, that incentivizes you to succeed. So,
That was kind of a shock.
yeah.
And then when I went into the program, and Sylvia told me this afterwards because she was one of those therapists there.
Right. Okay.
Nobody gave me a chance to succeed. They thought, you know what, David is too far gone.
Really?
He will not he will not be able to graduate from this program successfully.
Wow.
And they were an awesome bunch of people. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that they were negative or anything like that,
Right.
but they just thought there's too much trauma, there's too much in his past, there's too many areas to work with. And
Wow.
we were getting pool time, we were getting psychologists time, we were getting one-on-one, getting education classes, we had physical fitness classes, we had work on our own time
Mm-hmm.
classes. I mean, this was 6 hours a day
Wow.
for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I didn't see Sylvia right away. And this is why this is so impactful to me, was because when she came up and put her finger on my chest and said, "You have a story you need to get out." You know
Yeah.
what made me succeed there? I ended up spending 15 weeks
Mm-hmm.
in the program because it started working. But it
Right.
only started working once she reminded me who I was and
Wow.
who I should be.
Yeah.
Because for me to help others and I try to, I haven't always been very good at this, but I like teaching. I like trying to help others.
Mm-hmm.
I like supporting. I was bullied a lot as a kid,
Yeah.
and I hate bullies.
Me
And I
too.
like trying to help the ones that are down, right?
Right.
And she said, "You need to remember who you are." And so then in rehab, I started working with others
Mm-hmm.
instead of just seeing what I could get for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
that made all the difference for me. There was a lady on a treadmill, and she was going really slow, like 2 miles an hour, 1 or 2 miles an hour, just
Right. Right.
really slow. And she had had some facial injuries. She fell onto something that did some damage to her face,
Wow.
as well as shoulder and back issues.
Okay.
Similar to my accident in '91, right?
Okay.
And she she was in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
She said, so I walked over to her and I said, "How's it going?" She says, "Rough day today." I said, you're dealing with a lot of post-concussion symptoms. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, you have a brain injury that's holding you back. And she was just like, no doctor's ever said that to me.
Wow.
She had been 15 months post-accident,
Okay.
and nobody had said, you need to get some brain injury training or you need to get some help for that.
Really?
And yeah. And
Wow.
this is in this I met her in January of 2017. This is
Wow.
not back in the 90s like when it first happened to me.
Sure.
And this is the failure of our medical profession or
Yep.
medical system often up here is that brain injury stuff is pushed off to the side, you know. And so I was talking with her, and a lot of it is just, so I'm not crazy. No, no, you're not
No,
crazy.
no.
That's normal. What you're
Yeah,
feeling is normal.
totally.
You won't be back to what you were, but you're gonna have a new normal. And that was like an epiphany for her. And then she graduated faster than I did. She had a little less things to deal with.
Right. But I think also you instilled hope.
Yeah.
So, that's really instrumental in people making progress. There's post-traumatic stress. We've all heard about that, but there's also post-traumatic growth. And part of growth and being able to heal has a lot to do with the power of hope. And hope is really just us feeling like we have a sense of power over our future. So
You know,
I think you were very instrumental in providing that for her, which accelerated her healing process. At least from what I'm hearing, that's what it sounds like.
there's another part to this. There's a postscript to this.
Okay.
So several months after we both graduated from the course,
Mm-hmm.
she called me up because we stay in contact a little bit here and there. She called me up and says, David, need to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
So we met for coffee and we were sitting down talking.
Right.
And right at the end, as she's about to leave, she says, oh, by the way, I have breast cancer. And I was like,
Wow.
what?
Wow.
You're just waiting till now to tell me after we've sat here and visited, and you're just
Wow.
like, oh, by the way, I have breast cancer.
Like, oh, I had coffee this morning. Wow.
And I said, I was just like, what? And she's like, it's okay, David. After what you and Sylvia taught me in rehab, I got this.
Wow.
This is
Oh,
like, this is no big deal.
wow.
There's another guy. There's another guy in rehab,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like me
Mm-hmm.
previous to 2001,
Okay.
and he'd been in a motorcycle accident,
Mm-hmm.
and he was very frustrated. He wasn't recouping rehabbing as fast as he wanted to be,
Okay.
and he was in this program, and something was said in our education class with Sylvia, and he got really annoyed with me, because he's like, I had said something, what, sometimes it's better to just back off
Right.
and stop pushing because it's too hard on the brain. Oh no, I just pushed her. I'm a man, that kind of attitude, right?
Right. Right.
And when he went into that class, that education class,
Right.
all the other therapists said he will not get anything out of that class because he's too much of a man. He's too closed up. He's too
Oh, okay.
and too thought like I did back in the days was just push through it. I can power through this, right?
Right.
The day that he graduated, I always went to a quiet place to have lunch because I still was having too much trouble with noise and stuff like that because of my head injuries.
Yeah.
So I'd go in a quiet place, and the others knew that, and they could come in. Some of them came in with me, and some of them didn't. This guy came in, And this was the guy that at first he butted heads with me
Right.
because I'm a man, And the stuff that Sylvia had said to him in education class, we ended up being really, really good friends.
Right.
And at the last day of school, then he sat with me at lunchtime. He says, David, you know what I'm going to miss most? And I'm thinking, maybe the pool time, because we were giving the instructor a hard time, like we thought we were a couple of comedians or something. Or maybe it was the boxing matches that we used to have, because like the Wii boxing matches, that was part of our therapy for our shoulders, and coordination and whatnot. Maybe he's going to miss that. He says,
Sure.
I'm going to miss education class.
Wow.
And I was like, what? The one class that everybody thought was expendable, as far as therapists, except for Sylvia. Sylvia knew the benefit of the education.
Yeah.
But for others, they're like that. And the very guy that they said would never get anything out of this education class, it's like, I'm going to miss education class.
Wow.
I'm going to miss Sylvia. And so we were going down to yoga.
Okay.
And I saw Sylvia, and I said, Sylvia, I think you should say goodbye to this guy after yoga class because it's his last day. And she was not booked to be on. She was doing other classes and stuff. And so she waited in the yoga room. And then after yoga, then this guy comes out, and there's Sylvia, and she says, I hear it's your last day. And he's like, yeah. And this big tough guy, this big biker, broke down in tears and gave her a big hug and said, thank you so much. That's the power of somebody believing in you, the power of what we can do when we know what we're dealing with,
Of course.
and how we can go through it. I mean, that's exactly how you are. Like when you look at all the things you go through and the challenges that you've had in life, when you have the right mindset, you can do a lot. You can start working through things. But if you don't have that mindset, and if you don't know what you're dealing with,
right,
then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, you need to first know what you're dealing with, and then you can decide to tackle it.
You can cultivate potatoes all your life, and you're never going to get oranges.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You can have all the great knowledge on doing potatoes, but if you're trying to grow oranges, it ain't going to work.
Not going to help you. Yeah, that's true.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
That's kind of, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
I saw somebody the other day. I had something happen in trucking I've never seen in my life.
Right.
And I realized it was an interaction with some people, and I realized that these people weren't trying to screw me over or to mess me up. They were actually stealing fuel from me.
Oh.
And
wow.
I realized that they were not trying to steal. They just had no clue on how to run the fuel pumps.
Really?
Really, yeah. And I have no idea how they ever got through orientation or whatever at the company. But it was when I finally realized, like you can take it two ways, right? You can get real mad at them, and you can yell and scream at them, and you can do all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
But if you look at, well, why are you doing this?
Right.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And then take a couple minutes is all maybe about 10 minutes it took me to get it through to them how to do things properly.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, and you could easily just write them off and run away and say, a bunch of idiots. Or you can spend 10 minutes of your time and they'll understand things for going down their own.
Right. Right. And then everybody wins. They don't repeat that same cycle. They've learned what to do, and so now they're not stealing fuel from other people.
I've had people siphon fuel out of my truck and steal that way, but I've never had them brazenly take my nozzle and put it in their truck.
Yeah, that's I would
So,
have thought they were stealing too.
yeah, because
Yeah,
there's always two pumps, right? You have one on the left, one on the right,
right.
and when you're in commercial truck fueling, because you have tanks on both sides of the truck.
Right,
And
okay.
so I always started to put fuel in the driver's side, and they started to take my passenger side and put it into theirs
So
because they couldn't
there's
get their pump working.
interesting. So there are two pumps on
Yeah,
a. I didn't know that. And
yeah.
why?
So because you have tanks on both sides of your trucks.
Okay.
So
Is
there's
it
two
just for
tanks.
more fuel or?
Yeah, for more fuel and to balance as well. Like
Oh,
you don't want to have like I carry 250 gallons of fuel,
wow. Yeah, that's
which
a lot.
is somewhere around 2,000 pounds, 250 times eight. So somewhere around 2,000 pounds of weight, and you don't want to have that just on one side.
Wow.
So if you split it up and put it on both sides,
Yeah, then it's more balanced.
then
Yeah,
yeah,
for
more balanced.
driving. Yeah, to the
So
equilibrium. How fascinating. Interesting.
250 gallons. So
The things I
I
know nothing about.
I put in when I put in fuel one day in my truck, you could take the equivalent amount of gasoline and drive for the next couple of months.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Interesting.
big
Well,
bills.
what are some, can you talk about some instances in your recovery that were the most challenging and where you didn't feel like you had a lot of hope, for the future? Um, and how did you get through those?
Most challenging. Um, I would I would say in 2016 and 17 when I was in that return to work,
Mm-hmm.
physically the best thing I learned was technique
Okay.
and body mechanics.
Right.
Because if I'm working my shoulders, it doesn't help if I'm using my back as well.
Mm,
And so what our instructor Wes did the most was make sure we're using the right technique.
right.
And when I started using the right technique at that point in my life, I just thought there's no way I was ever going to get um, up until that point. I was like, I don't know how I can ever walk a block again without getting winded.
Right.
And another really impactful thing was I realized how beneficial walking is.
Yeah. I talk
And
about this all the time. Yeah.
I hated walking.
Really?
I hated walking. Too
Wow.
slow. I want to go somewhere fast, Courts. Like
Right.
when I'm
Right.
when I'm boating or when
Accomplish
I'm
everything by
skiing.
18. Got it. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, fast,
Fast.
straight down a hill when you're skiing. None of
Yeah.
this carving.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
for me, like to go from point A to point B, I could go on my bike because I could pedal fast, and I rode my
Yeah.
bike to work every day, eight
Wow.
miles,
Yeah.
and 8 miles back.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And as a kid, and walking was just way too slow. So you either run or you bike or you drive a car fast. And I started to understand how good walking was.
Yeah.
Once I had the mindset, I mean, I still figure I can accomplish anything if I work at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I mean, I'm alive. So
yeah. You're more than alive. I would say you're thriving. So
yeah.
yeah, for sure. No, walking is something I talk about a lot because I think people underestimate the power and the value of walking, and not just as a movement practice or like exercise, but it has a lot of hormonal benefits. It's very restorative, especially if you're walking out in nature. But even just, even in a city, like walking and, all the stimuli and the juxtaposition of having to center yourself and ground yourself in the midst of that is actually really, really beneficial. Being outside and getting direct sunlight on your pupils, that regulates your melatonin and your insulin, your cortisol. So it has really, really, powerful, benefits. It's also, I think it's very meditative. A lot of people, when they think of, walking, they think of walking like power walking for exercise, but right. And actually just like really restorative walking is incredibly meditative. Really gives you an opportunity to collect your thoughts and, inhabit your body and to, foster that mind-body connection. So, I always say all human beings are designed to move, and the ways in which we do our unique creative expression, but it's also like all human beings are really designed to walk. Not everybody's designed to run. Not everybody, barring certain physiological, impediments but even then, like even if somebody doesn't have legs, they still, walk with their hands or stroll in a wheelchair, and it's still the same type of movement. And I think the benefits are really similar anyway, but that's the reality. Not everybody's designed to, sprint and be a marathon runner or be, an Olympic sprinter or hurdler, but really walking is something we all can and should do. So that's my rant on walking, but I think it does really help people. Well, and it's a great starting place for really most people. I think a lot of people want to go from, like you say, you want to go fast, right? And people want to go from like A to Z in like 10 seconds, and it doesn't work that way.
I want to be healed tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, right. Everyone.
I always believed in that no pain, no gain.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, that's a great slogan when for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying to rehab from serious injury or from brain injury,
yeah,
you do not want to be pushing yourself till you're puking every day, all day long, because that's not helping you. You're in fight or flight mode. You're not restoring. So walking is that restorative thing where you go and you restore yourself, you rebuild the body battery. And that was another thing I had to learn, like I would push till I was puking, and the rehab is like, David, we're gonna get, this is another thing that really benefited me.
Okay.
How bad are you feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10? So if you're feeling a 5 bad,
right,
and pay attention to what's going on in your body. Mm-hmm. And once you get to a 7 bad, then they always talked about 2 points. So don't go past that.
Right.
Don't go to the 10. And to me that was a really good marker, because I would get up from doing an exercise and I'm like, ooh, I'm all dizzy again because I pushed too hard, and they're like, no. You need to only go 2 points at a time, and then you push so in other words, pushing your limit, just trying to push a little bit, expand a little bit.
Testing. Not trying to testing, right? Yeah. Trial and error, testing what you can do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can pop the balloon by blowing it up real big, real fast.
Right.
Or you can stretch it, and you can get it, massage it, working bigger and bigger, Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a challenge, and still is a challenge for me, mm-hmm. to back off instead of just thinking, oh, I need to just. I'll tell you, I was in my trailer a couple weeks ago, mm-hmm. and it was like 110 degrees or something outside.
Wow.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it was humid, and I was working inside my trailer near the top of the trailer.
Wow.
And I actually scared myself because I was like, I do not want to pass out in here, because if I do, it's going to be a while before anybody finds me.
Mm.
And my nature still is so much like show no pain, get up, keep moving.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got to get out of here. I got out of the truck and I went, or out of the trailer, went up to the truck, turned on the AC full blast, and laid on my bed in the AC for a while. And then I called a buddy of mine that was not far away, and I said, I need help.
Yeah.
And I said, I've only got a couple minutes of work left in my trailer, and I just can't do it anymore.
Wow.
And he came down and kind of gave me afterwards he says, call me next time before you're completely wet with sweat, please. I didn't tell him how bad off I was, but it was a little scary. And that is still something I work with today, and fortunately the old me probably would have passed out in the trailer.
Wow.
Because I'm stubborn.
Right.
I got this job to do. I need to get it done. I need to get it done as fast as I can.
Right.
Right. I would literally play hockey and come back and puke into the garbage pail at the end of my shift and keep going again, because that's just what you do, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it didn't do me any good. Didn't do me any good.
Well, I don't know that that's true, to be honest. Observing, I think it's the balance of that mindset that is that's the most productive. And I think, the fact that you did have that sense of like, I'm going to push through, I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to just sit back and accept that, case scenario, status quo is the end. So I actually think that stubbornness and that, that fortitude was actually really beneficial to your ability to surmount the challenges. And then, what?
That's why you're so smart.
Thank you. But then tempered with, your new discovery that, there's a time and a place to push, and then there's a time and a place to retreat and recover. And it really is the balance of the two that, is instrumental to, any progress. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when in 91, when I was laying on the bed in the emergency or ICU, I don't even know where I was. And the doctors are saying he's not going to survive the night. I'm listening, and I'm like, oh, hell no. That's not going to be me. I'm going to make sure my wife was 7 months pregnant. So I'm going to see the next one.
Wow. Yes.
So stubbornness definitely helps.
Yeah.
But to temper that, like you said, is really important.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So
it is about the balance for sure. Yeah. Wow. It's really incredible. It's incredible that you were able to find that balance and to, heal from that journey. What I'm curious about is that you had brain injuries, and it sounds like a lot of the healing modalities were physical. And about my project WIM, What is Movement, where we explore ways that movement helps people to heal emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And it sounds like that was a very instrumental component of your healing journey.
Yeah, it's easier to explain how you improve physically, I think, than mentally.
Sure.
Or I've been through a ton of brain retraining, and I really think that trying to improve mentally is something I don't probably explain very well, but I really believe in neuroplasticity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really believe that because I've had things where I've completely lost the ability to do certain things.
Sure.
And I haven't ever given up on that. And I know that I was going to build something once back in, I don't know when it was, not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I've done many times in the past
Mm-hmm.
prior to some head injuries. And so I knew the information was in there,
Yeah, sure.
but I could not get it to the place where I could use it.
Right.
And it was extremely frustrating
Sure.
and very hard. I mean, I broke down and cried. I'm sitting there in my workshop and I'm crying because I know I can do this, but I can't remember how to do it.
Yeah, that's hard.
And just a second here. Sorry. I sometimes I just don't know how to explain that, how to get through that. And what I did end up doing, and I ended up doing the project,
Yeah,
and I ended up figuring it out. But I had to calm myself down
right.
at first,
Sure.
and I had to break it down.
Yeah.
So I have to go back to kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
basically,
Right.
when it comes to rehabbing the brain. You
Right.
have to go back to the basics.
Always.
And so I'm like, okay, what's step one?
Mm-hmm.
And I had the wood. It was a project out of wood. I was making a railing and whatnot. It's not really complicated, but it was at that point. It was I couldn't do it,
Right.
and it build the basics. And um, another easy example of brain retraining is Sudoku.
Oh, I
So
love Sudoku.
yeah, so I
I've spent many
prior.
plane rides playing Sudoku.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
tons. And I was I was really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2016, after that injury, I couldn't do it.
Wow.
I'm just like, how can I not do this? Like
Yeah.
we used to, me and my kids, we'd have competitions, and I stopped doing competitions with them because I didn't want to make them feel so bad.
Mm. Wow.
Because they could start way ahead of me, and I could just boom, 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 boom. I could see the pattern in my mind. I'd
Yeah.
do it, and I'd get asked, "Well, how do you do that?" And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "It's all logical."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I
Pattern
couldn't
recognition.
anymore. And then I couldn't. And then that was really hard. And I'm sitting
Yeah.
there, and I know how to do this. I'm working on an easy one, and I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
and then it was back to the basics,
Right.
and that's you know the best way I can describe brain retraining is go back to the basics, go back
Yeah.
to the beginning. And it's like I talked to somebody the other day whose sister has got some pretty massive brain injury right now, and I said, go back to the basics.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, that part of the brain is dead, it can't work anymore. I say, yeah, yeah, it can. Maybe not that part of the brain, but neuroplasticity in the brain is amazing.
Amazing.
You can relearn how to do this stuff. Well, no, the doctor said that part of the brain is dead.
But other parts can take over and compensate. Yeah.
I said, does a child know how to run when it's born?
Nope.
Child doesn't know how to run.
No.
I mean, look at you, Court. You were told you were not going to be able to move.
Yeah.
You weren't going to be able to do anything. You
Mm-hmm.
do things on ropes and with weights and with different things, and I'm just like, oh man, you know. But you learn,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, that's a baby, that's a total. They're starting from scratch, and I'm like, yeah, you got to start from scratch. And
Yeah.
to get this through to people that go back to the basics,
Mm-hmm.
and it is kind of easy to talk about the physical things,
Sure.
but a lot of all of this still for me um, is rooted in the brain.
Yeah, of course it
Because
is.
if I can't remember how to do a push up,
Yeah.
which seems very simple,
Mm-hmm.
then I need to go back to the basics and relearn the mechanics, relearn the, like, well, why am I getting injured doing this?
Right.
why, and a lot of it is, to me, it all comes back to the brain.
No, it absolutely, the brain controls everything. It is the control center. Hearing you talk about going back to the basics, the thing that comes up for me in hearing this is that it was very humbling. And I think, right, that you struggled with, well, I've now got to go back to the basics, right? And things
Oh
that
yeah.
like Sudoku, which you were really good at. And all of a sudden, you have to really break it down, like doing a push-up. You have to break down the mechanics and relearn things. I actually think, even the most advanced, whether it be in, something like Sudoku or, athletics, anything, really benefit from going back to the basics. And I think, there is something to be said for, of course you want to push yourself, challenge yourself, always, but I think that there is something to be said for the lesson of the humility. So, is that, I can see the expression on your face. So tell me what you're thinking. Yeah. What does that
It
bring up
is.
for you?
It is everything.
Yeah.
It is everything. It's not just. It's not an option.
Yeah.
Humility is everything. And when I had that panic attack in 2001,
Sure.
and I realized I could no longer control something,
Right.
it was extremely humbling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me to say I had mental health issues, that was by far the toughest thing I'd ever gone through in my life.
Yeah.
And when you find out, when you're as capable as I am, I was never a star athlete,
Mhm.
but I was way better than I should have been because I pushed myself so hard.
Right.
And I had lots of heart. It's one
Yeah.
thing one of my coaches always said, I had heart.
Yeah.
Like it didn't matter what was happening. I had
I'll
the heart.
take heart over talent any day. Yeah.
And when you find out that you can't do things again, and I mean that's that's humbling. And so now what am I gonna do?
Right.
Am I gonna lash out at others? Am I gonna pretend it's not me, it's something else?
Right.
That's where you need humility and say, yeah, this is my problem. Because until you can say I have an issue here,
Yeah.
then you can't progress anywhere.
Right.
So humility and humbling yourself is everything. It
Sure.
really is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also gives you an opportunity to rediscover and to refine things. You know, I do. I think that, a lot of times when you're at the you're at the top of your game, there's a pride, right? And it's really easy to fall from there.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're willing to take the step back and really lay a solid foundation in anything, and if you're forced to, then there's you strengthen that foundation. And so when the next time you move forward and progress, it's that much stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a beautiful gift, and it's a great opportunity. And I think it's a good lesson for people who even don't have brain injuries, to recognize the value of humility, the value of training the basics in anything, because we quickly forget, things that become so second nature to us. We forget to appreciate them. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a friend growing up that was literally genius level, right?
Mhm.
I'm pretty smart, but nowhere near what
Mhm.
what he is.
Right.
And people always talk about how smart he is and how much of a genius he is.
Right.
What they don't realize is the work that he puts into it.
Yeah.
And I remember when we were both teenagers, he was trying to learn a foreign language,
Mhm.
and the language was Norwegian, and we have some Norwegian friends and stuff. So he carried a notebook with him, 16, 15, 16, 17 years old, whatever we were at the
Yeah.
time. And he'd run across somebody that could speak some Norwegian. So he'd ask about these questions,
Wow.
like, how do I say this? How do I say that?
Hmm.
And he'd write it in his little notebook.
Right.
And so in a year or two, and he was doing some translating for stuff, then people were like, wow, he is so amazing with languages. And I'm like, yeah, he's good with languages, but do you know how much work he's put into it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it just comes naturally to him. Like, no,
Oh,
it does not. And that's the way it is with everything. No matter what our talent is,
yes,
we still have to put in the work.
for sure.
And if we aren't putting in the work, then and for him, it probably was somewhat embarrassing or humiliating. I don't know. I didn't ask him.
Mhm.
I haven't asked him about it, but for him to ask questions when he's known as a genius,
Yeah,
very smart guy,
sure.
I'm sure that must have been like something he had to go through.
Yeah, because it affects your identity, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the labels that have been projected onto us impact our identity and our view of our sense of self. And
Yeah.
so to have the humility to recognize that you want something and you're willing to be taken down a notch in order to achieve it, yeah, that can definitely be a challenge for some people.
I
Yeah.
mean, the truly gifted athletes
Hmm.
are often the ones that are the most humble
Yeah.
and the most fun to be around. Very, very driven,
Yes.
very driven,
Yep.
but they know how they've got there
Yep.
and they're confident in their abilities, but
Absolutely.
they know they know how much work it takes.
Well, I always say, it's something I really respect about athletes because I think this is a metaphor for life. And I think but it's so tangible with athletes is that it doesn't matter how much talent they have. You're not getting to the Olympics by sitting on the couch every day, all day. They have to put the work in. And that's the thing. And talent is truly a gift, but it's about what do you do with that talent? What do how do you use it? And how do you live up to the fullest potential that you've been given? So the talent itself is definitely a gift, and I think it's something that's worth honoring. But I think that somebody's drive and their passion and their work ethic, a lot of times people who are put work in can outbeat talent any day if the talent doesn't work hard, right? That's the saying, how the saying goes. So, but if you have the combination of the two, then that's truly, I think, special. Yeah.
I used to look at artists
Mhm.
and more people,
Mhm.
athletes, and I'm like, man, I wish I was like that.
Yeah.
I wish I had their talent. How can they not, you see some
Mhm.
people that have an amazing talent,
Yeah.
you don't do anything with it, right?
Yeah.
Or they're just like, whatever. And I was like, how could that happen?
Mhm.
Like, how could you not see what an amazing talent you have? And then I
Yeah.
realized one day, David, you're like that.
Mhm.
I'm like, what? I have a talent for writing. I have a talent for
Yeah.
seeing the good in people.
You do.
So what am I doing with that? Am
Yeah.
I need to work with that. So that's what I do. But it really hit me like a ton of bricks one time. Like, I
Yeah.
may not have the talent that I wanted,
Hmm.
but I have a talent. And I think we
Yeah.
all have a talent of some kind, and we
Sure.
need to work with that. I
Yep.
mean, there's a parable in the Bible about that, with people given somebody given 10 talents, somebody given 5 talents, and somebody else given 1 talent.
Yeah.
And the one with 1 talent went and buried it in a field somewhere until his master came back
Okay.
because he was afraid to lose that talent.
Right. No, the talents are meant to be shared and
Yeah,
to be of contribution. Yeah.
it didn't work out for him.
No, it
Spoiler
didn't.
alert, it did not work out.
Yeah, no. And it doesn't for people, people who are selfish or overly prideful in their talents. It doesn't work out because they are meant to be shared, and to that is your means of being a contribution. It's a gift for all. So yeah.
Yeah. And I remember you saying, like about your story, that it's not that incredible because it's just you. It's what you've lived with all your life. And I felt the same way with my story. Like, I mean, I don't go through what you go through, Courtney. Like, my story's not very good. But then for some other people, it's just like, how have you survived?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I don't
And
know.
thrive.
I survived. And so we all have, an amazing story behind us, and
Absolutely.
we all have things that we've gone through,
Mm-hmm.
and in many cases, maybe we have more that we should be going through, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe you and I and others can help awaken that in them.
Yeah.
That okay, you can accomplish so much more.
Mm-hmm.
You can do so much more. You know,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting life, isn't it?
It is. It's a journey. It's an adventure. What
Yeah.
would you say are some of the ways that you are uh most different before some of these brain injuries and now after?
That one's real easy.
Okay.
Um, I was a very headstrong, arrogant,
Mhm.
no patience for anybody kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I know many coworkers did not like working with me because I did not suffer fools gladly. And so
Right.
my biggest thing is something that I said on Bell Let's Talk testimonial was, we don't know what others are going through,
Sure.
so be kind.
Yeah.
And the person I was before, when that guy was stealing fuel from me,
Uh-huh.
those two guys were stealing fuel from me,
Right.
would have gone off on them and never stopped. Um, to where now I take the time to try and teach, try to help.
Yeah.
And when somebody gets mad at me or around me,
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at the mad part. I'm trying to find out, look around, and what's triggered that?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Why, what is behind this?
Right.
So I can understand you better, and maybe need, get some help or be a help.
Right. I love that.
So people have, some people that didn't see me for a few years, they're like, what's happened to David?
Mm-hmm.
He's quiet now.
Right.
People notice that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have been I mean, rugby was a great sport for me, and hockey was a great sport for me
Mm-hmm.
because I could be very aggressive.
Right. Yeah. So it's a good outlet. Absolutely.
Yeah.
For
But,
sure. And there's a time and a place to be aggressive. So
oh, yeah.
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 Absolutely.
For sure.
So that one's easy. That's,
Yeah. What about, you were talking about your family and how you had some misgivings about the difficulty you may have imposed on them. How has this journey for them been, and what have they learned in the process of watching you deal with these brain injuries and overcome them?
you trying to make me cry?
I'm sorry. You're welcome to cry if that's what comes up for you. No judgment for me.
um, I you talk about the humility courts,
Mhm.
then being humble to my kids
Yeah.
about my problems and the things I've done wrong
Yeah.
is a big key. I believe that we can do a lot of things wrong if we, you know, I did a lot of things wrong in the 90s in the way I raised my kids. I was too aggressive. I'm the dad, you need to listen to me, you know, very strict boundaries, you know, kind of the way I grew up, right?
Right.
And um, that was something that was very hard to me once I realized how much of a prick I'd been. Um, and I told my kids that.
Wow.
You know, we've had family meetings where one of my son-in-laws a couple of years ago, we had a family meeting because I wanted to discuss something.
Yeah.
Somebody I'd hurt in the past and was causing some trouble.
Yes.
And so I got the family together and I said, this is the issue. And this is what I've done wrong. And this is what I'm working towards to fix. My
Right.
son-in-law said to me, he says, my parents would never say that. My dad would never say what he's done wrong.
Wow.
And to me, that was validation that I was on the right path.
Yeah.
And so when we have the right, you know, we can do all kinds of things wrong, but once we realize and we can change and go in the right direction
Right.
and admit, you know, like, hey, I screwed this up. You know, I wasn't very good in this. And the kids, you know, they're like, okay, let's go on. And there's my oldest boy. He bore the brunt of a lot of it. He's very aggressive. He had some challenges in school that made things worse with him, and he's bipolar. So, and I mean, I didn't know what I was dealing with. How could I help him?
Right.
You know, and he wasn't diagnosed as bipolar at the time, but anyway, he spent some time in jail, and then he realized that he was the problem, not everybody else. And he had threatened my life many times, and things were really rough, right?
Sure.
And he said, "You never did anything with me." You know, he was very mad for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And when he was in jail, like I said, he changed, and then he he decided, you know, he says, I'm gonna write down all the good things I do remember.
Yeah.
And he wrote them on a list. And he could only speak to me, he'd only call out for 10 minutes at a time.
Right.
So it took probably close to a month, and he'd be calling me every day. And it was not easy to call, you know, he had to first get a phone.
Yeah.
And then he had to call my sister-in-law and then relay it through into Canada.
Wow.
So by the time, you know, sometimes he'd have to talk to her about something. So we might get 7 or 8 minutes.
Right.
And be like, okay, Dad, I got to go through this list. And he would go through and we did this. And I always appreciate the fact that we went off-roading together with the old blue pickup. Or we did this together and we did that together. And we had this memory together. And he has pages. He has pages of this.
Wow.
And it didn't matter what I was doing. I could be at work in the middle of an important meeting and I'd be like, sorry, my son's calling. Gonna take this. He was just calling a few minutes ago and I canceled the call, but he's not in jail now, so I can call him back anytime. Back then, I couldn't call him back, of course.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can go through that with every one of my kids. That
Yeah.
my younger kids didn't see as much
Sure.
of a difference.
Right.
The older ones, there is something. If you don't mind, I'll look something up here quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
One of my oldest daughter
Mm-hmm.
is a bit of a writer as well,
Ah.
and speaker. And
Mm-hmm.
this one is from my youngest daughter. She sent this to me. I don't know when it was. She says, "Hey, Dad, just thought I'd let you know that I miss you loads. I may or may not have listened to Convoy, the song, the other day, and started crying."
Oh.
And one thing I did not like when I was younger was poetry.
Oh, interesting. You write poetry now.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
throw one for you.
You did. A beautiful one. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what I aim to be. I may have sent this one to you. A car wash named Sylvia. You know what it's like driving around, windows dirty, mirrors useless. Every accidental touch leaves dirt on good clothes. It's depressing. Travel isn't as much fun, just like real life. Some times in life are hard. They leave you stained, weary, longing for something good. Then you spy a car wash. It doesn't make sense. The weather is still so gloomy, but there's no lineup, so you go in. It's like meeting the health activist Sylvia. When you hear the confident clack of her heels, you happily anticipate what's to come. Her
Mhm.
voice, her genuine concern for you, is like a gentle wash. As you talk, life's cares and worries slide off. Advice, comfort, given from a huge heart that has itself withstood many storms in life, is like the wax from a car wash. You still need to protect and help yourself, but for a while you feel invincible. As the sound of her heels dies away, you emerge refreshed, clean, protected. Life may still be overcast, but that no longer matters. You have just been Sylvia'd.
Wow.
So that's my desire, that when people come in contact with me, I'm like a car wash to them, that they can go away and they feel like refreshed.
Oh, I love that. What a great vision to have of yourself and for what you want to have other people's experience of you be. So,
So I don't know what I did with the one from Abby. I know I can send it to you later sometime.
yeah.
But it was very, every time I read it, I end up shedding a few tears.
Oh.
But I've been very, very thankful for my kids that have put up with me.
Mhm.
But they wouldn't put up with me if I hadn't humbled myself.
Right. Right. Yeah, it sounds like it's been a real learning experience for all of you. I
And
think in some ways it's been, not that I would ever wish you to have gone through what you've gone through, but in some ways there were a lot of gifts that came as a result.
it's the best thing that's happened. These challenges are not a detriment in any way. The things I've been through is the best thing ever. Because it's made me who I am. I mean, if I hadn't had that truck run over me in 2001, what would have happened? Like, would I have continued on in ignorance for much longer and done more damage?
Right.
You know, I I mean, we'll never know, right? But
We'll never know.
we'll never know. But what I do know is that it changed my life,
Yeah.
and I mean, even in 91, you know, a frontal lobe injury, so it made me even more aggressive than I had been previously. And I didn't know how to work with it.
Right.
It was beneficial in some ways as
Sure.
far as the injury part, but as far as what I learned, it's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm not the athlete that I used to be. And I never will be
Right.
anymore. But that's okay, and that's humbling. You know, I can't. I have a friend of mine. You know, he's 2 years older than me,
Hmm.
and if we played on the same hockey team prior to '91,
Hmm.
playing with our friends or with whatever, we never
Right.
got beat. We just wouldn't get beat. We couldn't play on the same soccer team when we play soccer because we'd win. You know, so we're always on opposing teams.
Okay.
And push-up challenges or whatever challenges came along, he was always better, but I
Hmm.
was always like a half step behind.
Hmm.
And nowadays, he's still doing all this stuff,
Is
and
he?
here I am, and I'm chunky, and I'm not as I'm nowhere near, but I have other things. I
Hmm.
have other talents that I need to keep using,
For sure. For sure.
you know, and to be not just to be thankful, but be to use that. I don't even know how to describe it, Quartz,
Mhm.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So
What?
if I had stayed as an athlete, I probably would have been still been arrogant because I would have been one of those ones that wasn't the best, but I still think I was the best. One of those.
Right.
Yeah.
One of those. One of those. What what are some things that some advice from what you've learned that you want to share with other people? Other people who might be dealing with brain injuries or just challenges in general. Yeah.
Be honest with yourself.
Hmm.
That's the basis. Be honest with yourself.
Right.
When you're reacting in ways that aren't very good, and be honest with yourself. Is it because of you just being a jerk? Or is it something that you can trace back and find out that, you know, this other thing is what's bothering me?
Right.
So that's always the easiest and best piece of advice is be honest with yourself about what your problem is. We want our problems to be something else and something that's easier.
Uh-huh. For
Or
sure.
we look at somebody else and say, oh, they have easier problems than I have. Like, oh, no, they don't.
No.
Because it costs us everything,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
because it's yours, your challenges are yours.
Yeah.
So they're not somebody else's aren't going to be easier or harder for you.
Yeah.
That's their path to walk. So I think it's interesting when you were saying that if you were still an athlete, you would still be basically an arrogant jerk. I don't think it's because you were an athlete, it's because you didn't have the experience of being humbled. So you didn't have the perspective to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
That this seems to be the biggest lesson that you really learned is to have that uh, ability to reflect honestly and to hold a mirror up to yourself and to do it with grace, compassion, but also discipline. And I think that that's really admirable, and I think that those are key elements to have helped you to overcome. So
You understand this stuff far better than I do, you know, and you're very smart with picking that stuff out. But yeah, you're right.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, well, this has been amazing. Let me know if there are any other, first of all, let everybody know where they can find you. And if there's any other kind of closing remarks or things you want to share, please do.
Um, you know, I have my podcast, Crazy Canuck Trucking,
Mhm.
and you can find that either on Instagram or Twitter. I have a website, crazycanucktrucking.com. You know, no G on the end of trucking. And I was known for a long time in the industry, trucking industry, as Crazy Canuck Dave. And actually, there's a funny story behind that. And this
Yeah.
will, like, I was called Crazy Canuck Dave um, before mental health issues. You know,
Okay.
when I was living on the East Coast,
Hmm.
then because of my attitude and everything,
Right.
then, well, at first I was called the Canadian because everybody has a CB handle. And so I was the Canadian.
Okay.
And then one of the guys was like, "You're crazy." And because I had a little truck, a little Mac, uh, power wise,
Yeah.
and I beat a guy once that had a really big truck.
What do you mean
And
beat him?
well, we always ran in packs,
Okay.
and at this time I was doing gravel, and we were hauling out of Pennsylvania down to Delaware, and then from Delaware up to Pennsylvania. And there's this guy that was always running his mouth, and so I was pulling out of the quarry one day, and he's like, get your little black Mac out of the way, and it's kind of stuff. And I'm like, hey, Trapper John, you won't catch me. I'll be down unloaded, and there's lots of lights, there's lots of corners, and there's a bit of luck involved, but there's also, you need to push your limits a little bit.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And I got down, I unloaded my stone, I was reloading sand already
Hmm.
before this guy comes in.
Right.
And then everybody, because we're all in the big packs, they're like, Crazy Canuck has done it and beat this guy. And he wouldn't talk to me for months, which was great because he avoided
Got him
me
to
like
shut
the
up.
plague. He avoided me like the plague. And at that time, the Canadian ski team was called the Crazy Canucks. And
Oh,
one of the
really? I didn't know
drivers,
that.
yeah, one of the drivers
Okay.
knew that, and so he started calling me the Crazy Canuck because of that incident. Plus, because I drove like the Crazy Canuck ski team at the time, Steve Podborski, Ken Reed, I
Okay.
can't remember the other guys, but they had a reputation of when they'd go to a ski hill for
Mhm.
a for an event,
Okay.
World Cup event, then they would just attack the course like crazy, very aggressively,
Right.
way
Right.
more than anybody else at the time. And they didn't have a ton of talent, but they had the aggression and the heart.
Okay.
And so they were called the Crazy Canucks.
Oh, how
And
funny.
so this trucker knew that, and he started calling me Crazy Canuck Dave. And then when I got onto Twitter, I'm like, what am I going to call myself? People still calling me the Crazy
Mhm.
Canuck a little bit. So then that's where, for a long time in trucking industry, I'd go to see people at truck shows, and I'd tell them my name is David Henry, and like, oh, don't know you. And then like, Crazy Canuck Dave. Oh, right.
Oh,
Sorry. So
your alias.
and because after one podcast, then a guy wrote into my podcast and says, he's kind of offended over me using the crazy part, like, what are people with mental health issues going to think? And I'm like, I'm using it. I'm owning it. I have been crazy. I'm still somewhat crazy. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's
So there's
awesome.
no shame with being what's so-called crazy.
Mm-hmm.
There's no shame with mental health issues around here
Mm-hmm.
because we all have our issues
Of course.
and we're all very strong. We all have our talent. So
Yeah.
you
Amen.
can look me up, Crazy Canuck Dave on Twitter, or Crazy Canuck Trucking, or look for Crazy something and you might find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And yeah, it was awesome.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you.